Hi, everyone. Today on the Writing Gym podcast, we're talking about how to turn your ideas into action. You're going to walk away with specific tips on new ways of researching, setting attainable goals, finding your story, figuring out your audience, and how to find a mentor or group, like the lovely people in the Writing Gym, to help you finish your project.
Welcome to the Writing Gym podcast. We're here to pump up your writing. And now your host, Andy Brixey, personal trainer at the Writing Gym.
Hi, I'm Andy, personal trainer at the Writing Gym. Welcome to Hitting Your Stride with Julie Connor. Julie is going to share with us how to transform your dreams into action with attainable goals. I'm excited to introduce you to this week's guest, but first, I'd like to introduce you to our resident writing coach, the gal who helps you pump up your writing into shape in the Writing Gym. Welcome back to the Writing Gym podcast, Annalisa Parent.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Guys, I don't want to tell stories out of school, but here is a literal story from Annalisa's school. She used to be the proud mascot. Yes, Annalisa dressed up as a wildcat and danced around wildly with her pom-poms. I'm told there is a photo of this moment, and we will be putting that in the show notes for all of you to enjoy.
For better or for worse, that's true.
And now to introduce you to our fantastic guest this week. As a TED speaker, educator, and author, Dr. Julie Connor prepares youth to be leaders and adults to be mentors and role models. She inspires audiences throughout the country to dream big and transform passion into action with attainable goals. Julie is the author of the award-winning goal-setting book, Dreams to Action, A Trailblazer's Guide. Thank you so much for joining us today, Julie.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
So, Julie, as a writing coach, I think a lot about, and as a writer, I think a lot about writing and how people come up with their ideas and then when they choose to execute them. So I'd love to hear your story on where your inspiration came from for this idea and then how you followed your motivation to turn that into a real book.
The motivation for this particular book, Dreams to Action Trailblazer's Guide, came out not out of a brilliant success, but out of hardship. I really believe that oftentimes the book we write is oftentimes the book we need. Mm-hmm. And at the time that I wrote Dreams to Action Trailblazer's Guide, it had followed a period in my life where I had graduated with my doctoral degree in education. My research was a model of study in 2 universities. I had several scholarships that recognized me for outstanding leadership and academic graduate ability. And when I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, several months before that, I was working in a school district as an instructional coach. The school district downsized, and I lost my job. So when I crossed the stage after defending my dissertation, I was picking up clothing on the dressing room floors in Macy's because I couldn't find another job. I had what I believed was too many years of experience. I believe I was too educated, and I thought I was too old. And I can't think of a time in my life when I was more discouraged, and I wasn't sure how to pick myself up. I read books. I read magazine articles. I tried to find information about people that had reinvented themselves. And I was so inspired by the stories of so many people, but I didn't know how to translate that into my experience. I listened to audio recordings. I went to their workshops, and then I went to the lectures of seasoned professionals who were experts in motivation and inspiration. But when I read the books, oftentimes the books were about how they experienced success, but they didn't explain how I could experience success. There were no tangible steps about things I could pursue in my own life that I could dig myself out of the hole I was in to lead a different life that I knew I was called to be. Somewhere in the depths of my heart, even when I received the letter that invited me not to come back to the school district. Even when I had that letter, I knew what was inside of it. I knew its contents. I had not yet opened it, and it felt like fire in my hands. And I knew it was an invitation. Julie, what are you going to do now? You've prepared yourself all this way. Now what are you going to do? For most of my life, I've led organizations, churches, and schools through organizational vision, mission, and goal-setting strategies. But I didn't know how to make the process personal. And in the next 2 years that followed, I had to figure out what's my own personal vision. What's my purpose? What work is mine to do? And once I get clear about some of those things that are so most important to me, what things are on my bucket list, then it was up to me to figure out how am I going to pursue those goals. The book that I wrote, Dreams to Action Trailblazer's Guide, is not a book about my own story. It's a workbook that is an invitation for others to tell their story, to get in touch with their own story, and then how can they take their own dreams, their own passions, their own goals, and break those down in a way that they can start pursuing their own passions, even if all they have is 15 minutes a day.
I love that idea, Julie, of not only sharing a bit about your personal story and giving people some inspiration, but moving into those actionable steps, which are so important for people to move forward, whether it's in writing or in choosing life goals. So I applaud your effort, and your book sounds fascinating. I think I need to check it out, and I hope that our listeners will as well, because certainly you have a lot to offer in creating those actionable steps for people to move from one place to another.
I'm often asked at workshops and conventions where I speak about being a writer or about sharing story and sharing personal experiences for motivation or inspiration. And typically about half the people in the lines that want to question me afterwards are people that ask, and I'm very flattered when they ask this, is how can I do what you're doing? How can I write? How can I be a speaker? What do I need to do? And I typically ask, tell me about your story. And who do you think your audience is? Who's your demographic? What's your message? Who do you have to share it with? And oftentimes people are very much in tune with their own story. But as we've talked in the past, our story needs to have some kind of connection to a call to action. If it doesn't help us dig out of where we are or where we were, there's no arrow that points us forward. And I believe that it's important for us as writers and speakers to give others the tools they need to empower them with the tools they need to move on.
It's so funny hearing you talk about, setting these attainable goals and the steps that you need to do them, because that's what, Annalisa is my writing coach as well. And that's what she did for me in my writing is, rather than just telling me this isn't good, she takes the time to say, this doesn't work and this is why, and here's how we fix it. And I feel like that's such an important thing is, when you set personal goals is, making yourself accountable for them. That's something I do in the writing gym. I'm a personal trainer and I make people accountable for the words that they write, whether their goal is to, write 5 pages a day or, 2 sentences a day. I can help them with that so that they have someone to check in with to make them accountable for that. Do you think that it's an important component within setting those attainable goals that you have someone, like Annalisa, like myself, who is there to answer to your actions?
I think there's 2 things that you mentioned that are very important, in fact, critical to the process. One is writing. I believe goals in writing are dreams in action, that we give our dreams purpose and meaning and power when we put those in writing. We also make a commitment when we put, whether it's to ourselves or to the goal itself, when we put it in writing, there's a commitment piece that starts to unfold about what it is we know that is ours to do. The second piece that you mentioned that I believe is critical is having a partner or a coach, or as Napoleon Hill calls a mastermind group with which we can share those goals and targets. I think the process that unfolds is in 1 week we share our goals and critique our work, and the following we celebrate wins. And I believe a celebration of accomplishment is not necessarily in the accomplishment of a goal, but in the taking of one single step. That's where it happens. Somebody I really admire is Guy Kawasaki. I'm in his acknowledgments because I was fortunate to be asked to critique his book, The Art of the Start 2.0. And I believe many of those invitations happen because we fully engage with one another, whether it's in the one-on-one or across social media. Those kinds of contexts give us opportunities to hold one another accountable. And one of the things that Guy says that just makes me laugh is he says the one thing about success is not to be afraid of getting into the sandbox. Don't be afraid to get into the sandbox and break stuff. And I believe that's what we do as writing. Don't be, you don't write the full novel when you sit down and put pen to paper. It's a process. And it's not necessarily a process we enjoy, but it is an invitation to fully express a story that may be helpful either to ourselves or someone else.
That's beautiful. I really love that idea. There were so many nuggets of wisdom in there as excellent takeaways for people listening. And if you don't follow Guy Kawasaki, he's got wonderful work, and that's amazing, Julie, that you're in his acknowledgments and we're able to reach out and help him with his book. I mean, we never know where those connections will lead us, and to find someone that we can help, someone who can help us, a nice connection, or somebody to buy our book today, right? So another episode that we've done, which we'll link to in the show notes, is about reaching out to people and how to do that in person, because sometimes that can be intimidating, whether we want to sell a book or if we're looking to make business connections or whatever. Making those personal connections can sometimes be intimidating, but it's so important to do for our businesses and for our lives, for our growth.
Susan Cain wrote a beautiful book called Quiet, and it really is about those of us who are introverts. And I think if you were to line up so many of the popular celebrities that are on stage, Chris Rock, Robin Williams, God bless his memory, Amy Schumer, there's so many that, Dana Carvey, they bring such wonderful present to the stage, and the one thing they all share in common is they're introverts. And I believe it's finding and capturing the story within us and sharing it with others gives not only us power in sharing the story, but it builds connections with one another. And so, like you said, there's an openness that we need to be willing to risk if we're going to be writing and speaking and sharing story.
Oh, I love that so much. I love the idea of openness.
It's not always easy because with writing is vulnerability. And one of the things that was really critical about my own life is we enjoy sharing the successes we've experienced. We enjoy celebrating and sharing with people information that cast a favorable life. It's not easy for me in my, even on my website at www.drjulieconnor.com, I share part of my story in the About section. And when I first developed my website, I wanted to share bullet points of the things where I experienced success. And it was excruciatingly difficult for me to share my divorce I had a panic disorder so severe I was housebound. The loss of job, the loss of loved ones. And how do you pick yourself up when you feel like you've lost everything? And what I found is that those are doorways to celebration and connecting with others in the one-on-one. I remember we were talking earlier about I'm a traumatic brain injury survivor. And it was very easy for me to connect with others since 2004 on a very academic level because I could memorize material that I needed to repeat to groups over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, do you mind if I share a quick story?
No, please do.
I belonged to a Toastmasters group because especially when I stepped out on the speaking circuit, because I wanted to sharpen my own skills and perhaps I had a thing or two to teach them. Well, one day, I didn't realize at the time how much I had to learn. And one day, there was a gentleman who gave the most courageous speech I've ever heard in my life. And he talked about being a stutterer and how it physically felt when the words were trapped inside his throat. I went up to him afterwards and I said, "That's the most courageous thing I've ever heard." And I asked for him to describe the experience to me. As he spoke, I nodded. And at one point in our conversation, I said, "I understand." And he looked at me and he was very angry. And he said, "How can you understand any of what I experienced?" And it was the first time I admitted in public that I was a brain injury survivor and I deal with short-term memory loss. I wasn't afraid of speaking in front of an audience. I was afraid of forgetting in front of an audience. And finally, the worst happened when I was in a room of 1,500 individuals and I forgot what I was saying. And then I panicked and I forgot what I was speaking to the audience about. So I stopped, I took a breath, I looked at the audience and said, "I forgot what I was talking about." I briefly told them what I was challenged with. Somebody prompted me. We all laughed. I went on. And then at the end of the presentation, there was a large line. A few of them wanted to talk about the skills and the academic work that I had come and been invited to introduce. But most of the people that were in that line wanted to share with me their own story, their own experience, someone they loved, something they dealt with themselves, because I believe that is the critical piece in the art of storytelling, the art of writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. So how can I take this material and apply it to my own life? How can I connect? And where do relationships build?
Oh, I love those ideas about storytelling. That's really spot on. Yes.
Yeah, it's funny. Julie, the more that you speak, the more that there are just all these parallels between you and Annalisa of just your beliefs in, you know, how to make a story and how to write. And it's very funny. It's weird how the universe works to bring people together. Everything that, you know, you've said that, you know, as far as how to share your story, how to find your audience, how to do those things. These are all things that Annalisa has shared with me. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to pick up a copy of your book so that I can start working on my own workbook and make all of my dreams come true. We do have one final question that we ask of all of our guests, and that is, if you could give one little piece of advice to aspiring writers, what would it be?
My piece of advice, I've got several, but I think one that I'm thinking of in particular, especially in the context of this conversation, is find a mentor, a writing partner, or a coach. Find someone you trust who has more experience than you do in the art of writing. Find somebody who is honest, because many writers, I don't believe, are a success because they want to be told their work is brilliant. I don't need anyone to tell me about the quality of my work. I need someone who can tell me how to make it better. And that it doesn't necessarily mean I need to act on all the advice that I receive, but to have somebody, whether it's a group or a mentor or a coach, somebody that can provide you with honest, critical feedback that can support you in your work and give you guidance on how to improve it, will help you be a successful writer.
That is such fantastic advice. Oh my God, Julie, that is the best advice that I think that I've ever heard. I wrote it down. Capital letters across my notebook.
Isn't it awesome to be quoted?
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Julie. This was beautiful. Everything that you had to say was absolutely wonderful. For our listeners, please follow everything that Julie does through her website, www.drjulieconnor.com. We'll include a link in the show notes, so make sure and check that out. The website contains links to purchase her new book through Amazon, as well as links to her wonderfully inspirational blog and printable tools to help you realize your own goals. As always, check out the show notes at www.writing-gym/podcast for all of that information at the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Julie.
It was an honor to be here. Thank you so much. It was great to participate in this conversation. And good luck, writers.
Thank you, Annalisa, for more of your great writing advice. Annalisa is the resident writing coach in the Writing Gym. She helps writers start, finish, and bring to publication writing in all genres. She's smart, she's fun, and most importantly, she gets people published. You know, you could publish if you only knew how. Julie has given us some great tips today, writers, but look, if you love the Writing Gym podcast, if you find these tips valuable, think of how much faster your writing will get pumped into publishing shape in the Writing Gym. We take you from generating ideas to getting them on paper, from how to find an agent to how to market your book. You'll also connect with other writers who will support you and give you quality feedback. We even have a personal trainer, me, to help keep you accountable to your writing goals. You know how you always say, I love to write, but I just can't find the time. What would it be like to have a gentle guide, someone to check in with you on how you're doing on your weekly writing goals? Well, you can, and that's me. You can get the accountability you need to make the time for writing in the Writing Gym. If you're serious about pumping your writing into publishing shape, apply now. Go to writing-gym.com. Don't forget the dash. Thank you so much for joining us to pump up your writing here on the Writing Gym podcast. Make sure and leave us a fantastic 5-star rating if you enjoyed this week's episode, and it will allow others to find this fastest growing podcast on the net. Be sure to check out the show notes and download the free handout on how to improve your writing at www.writing-gym.com/trailblazer. Happy writing!
This has been the Writing Gym Podcast with Andy Brixey and Annalisa Parent. To join the Writing Gym, visit www.writing-gym.com.